The Runeterra devs just streamed the balance changes for patch 4.4, and in this video, I am co-streaming the dev update with live reactions, and at the end of the video, I will have a recap with all my thoughts. Let me know what you think of this patch in the comments, and don't forget to like the video. So the way to see this is just a way for the developers to explain some of the balance changes. We don't get the official patch notes until tomorrow, so what I'm gonna do this stream is I'm gonna just react to the changes. I'm gonna give some thoughts in a moment, and then afterwards I'm gonna summarize my thoughts, and then tomorrow I'm gonna do a stream when the official patch note release, and I'm gonna give my thoughts more in depth after sleeping on it for a night. That's the plan.
Okay, cool. Let's get right into the nerfs.
Yeah, let's do it.
Wanna kick us off, Steve?
Yeah, speaking of unbuffs, we have Ashe going back to her ancestral homeland of Avarosa at quest at 5. We were finding that Ashe just really needed that extra level up to compete in the old environment. Now with rotation, we actually think that she's just leveling up way too fast. Being able to just kind of end the game with a crystal arrow really early, get that extra health early. So we just want to make sure that you can't necessarily get that Ashe online and get her leveled up so fast to end the game. I don't know if that was what was necessary. We also are changing Reckoning to 7. There were a lot of changes we could do. We actually considered other unbuffs, like things to Avaros and Hearthguard that we felt were not necessarily going to hit the deck that much. Reckoning was really a card that, especially with the removal options now available in Standard, it's actually really hard to fizzle a Reckoning, and oftentimes you're kind of held hostage when you're forced to sort of play around it for multiple turns, waiting for them to tap out. It really felt like a situation where Reckoning was the card that was really pushing that deck to be super strong in the meta. So we push it up to 1 mana. It'll be a bit more transparent, a bit easier to play around, but it will still, in combination with the Frostbites and Trifarians, be able to get you that huge board wipe.
Okay, I mean, sure, I see it. Yeah. I wanted the Assessor nerf though.
There's a lot of people doomsaying about Ashe disappearing now, but I think too, like I feel like once there's the context of all of the buffs and nerfs, I think things will make a little bit more sense. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. Frank, do you want to talk about? Yeah,
as expected, of course.
Of the town, Samira's All Out.
Of course, very good.
Yeah, for sure. So Samira definitely
very good.
Coming out swinging in Glory and Navori. Really versatile champ. Seen a lot of play, a lot of different places, a lot of different deck speeds. There were a lot of ways we tried.
Still going to be strong, by the way.
Approaching, like trying to tone her down a bit, and All Out was definitely the big one, just as an extremely cheap and versatile spell that allowed you to protect her as well as your other champions or important combo pieces of the deck. So what we're gonna do to All Out is just lower the health on the plunder bonus from 2 to 1. We're really hoping that this will let people playing against Samira have more opportunity to interact with her, remove her from the board, or just use removal a little bit more reliably.
Buffs. I'm waiting.
Especially with it being her champ spell, you get as a Samira player, you get access to a ton of All Outs in a game. Yeah. You could generate some from Wiggly or Father Fury. So we're really looking at this as a way to take some raw health and protection out of the deck, which we're hoping will go a long way for the play against.
This is still a really good card.
I think that Plunder, we like giving you a bonus for Plunder, right? But in specific situation with Samira, it's really easier than ever to get Plunder, especially with Samira's All Out, since that applies that you have a Plunder enabler in Flare already, which really was making Samira both so easy to protect, but also just good on defense. All outing my Samira, leveling her up. Now she has 5 health. That was just really too strong for a lot of decks to compete with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the tale as old as time. We've seen Shapestone, Twin Disciplines, Sharp Side, all these cheap spells that both do protection and offense
I miss Sharp Side
really well, and we got to really
that would have been pretty good against their deck.
We want it to excel at.
Chat is saying surely this isn't the only thing hitting the Samira Fizz deck, and that brings us to the next slide. Frank, do you want to bring us home here?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So, yeah, that is
Burble nerf. God damn.
It's definitely not. Well, it's probably maybe the best thing going on. It's not the only.
It'll still be 0 though, but
spell spam focused versions of Samira.
Nice.
The way that Samira plays, and maybe something like the Leona and Daybreak decks, is playing a much fair game. It's trying to level her up and get her rally in more of a
Burble Fish Lysandra.
Whereas the spell spam decks are really trying to eat it
and just never play any spells.
Explosive things that are very difficult to interact with and can snowball the game. So to fight back against that, we've got everyone's favorite Wiggly Burble Fish. knocking it back a few pegs, up in that cost from 6 to 8, hoping to turn down or slow down the turn. You get the free Burble. And we're just going to take a single health off Inferna because she's a really, really powerful back row engine. And, combining this with All Out, we're really just looking to take some health out of the deck. And if you're
this still doesn't change Vera Samira or Samira Leona.
Base removal, we want that to be a little bit easier.
At all.
Yeah, this is an interesting change for Burble Fish because I feel like Burble Fish has reared its head many
Timeline
times in the history of lore.
Just don't pick it. Actually,
Burble Fish is so cute.
That damned smile.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot
my
of
pillar
people are
becomes a
saying that
2/1.
it's weird, but I feel like
Just
I'm
don't pick
still
it,
gonna
man.
get like destroyed by like a Burble Fish deck on ladder when I'm not expecting it.
Oh yeah, we definitely nerfed it in a way where like dedicated spell decks are still gonna get 1 or 0 mana Burble Fishes for sure.
Yeah.
It just might not happen on like round 5 with a rally, so.
Yeah, fine.
Anywho, let's get into the next change, Steve, because
here we go.
Leona has been
Perfect. Yeah, this is really good. I like this.
Yeah, so this is kind of more similar to other unbuffs.
That's great.
That, first off, we're taking Leona's quest from 4 to 5, and we're taking Sun Guardian's health down 1. This is actually one of, we look back at this rework
exactly
when we
what I
originally
wanted.
reworked Leona, I believe last year, as one of our more successful rework packages because Leona was basically never playable in any decks, and she came out and at the time was balanced, made the meta, but then ended up falling out eventually. Now with rotation, we actually see her being incredibly strong, just curving out with Daybreaks. One thing that we've experienced is that Leona just comes down leveled up on 5 like so often, it almost feels too free and unsatisfying in a way that we don't really love where her design is at 4 because it just means she comes down leveled and there's not much to
No,
look
it
for.
doesn't. It's a 3/3.
Putting your quest up to 5 both just prevents that repeated barrier from happening as early.
Sun Guardian
makes your
dives to
offensive
Mystic,
capabilities a lot worse. Like you're gonna get that first Leona Daybreak stun on her level 2. About 1 round later, which means those decks can be raced with by other aggressive strategies. And then Sun Guardian really is just such a snowball machine, especially now that we see removal is toned down and the format is a bit slower than we saw before standard rotation. We just want to make sure that players
I'm worried, actually.
just completely
Samira
overtake the game with a Sun Guardian on 3, followed by a few more Daybreaks. We're really optimistic that Daybreak can still be a viable package both for mid-range and aggressive decks, but we're really taking some of the snowball potential out.
I think. Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Bryce. Go ahead.
Okay. I was gonna say I just really wanted to strongly +1 that I think from the design side we're really happy with Daybreak having its chance to
super great rework on
we are
Leona.
pretty hopeful that we tested 5 different iterations of Sun Guardian stats to make sure we found one where we felt like it would still get to do its thing. So definitely not trying to just kill Daybreak from the metagame with this one.
I feel like both of you operate and play the game at a very high level, and I'm trying to get to a higher level, but I feel like Daybreak is a really good archetype, especially for newer players, and when I wasn't really familiar with the game, to kind of get used to lore. So I've enjoyed Leona's time in the sun.
It warms my heart because literally Daybreak is designed as a more newer player archetype. The idea I just play my units on curve and they get a little bit better as I go is definitely Leona's original intent.
So there was a really interesting question in chat. It was actually about the earlier changes, but I want to
warms
ask
my
you
heart
as well. It's still fresh. So some people were asking, why didn't we touch Shelly? What was the decision to go the Burble Fish and Inferno route? And did you guys consider Shelly as an option?
We did consider Shelly. I think that generally we find Shelly is this card that is played in high synergy decks. One thing that we wanted to do is not necessarily kill Bilgewater's spell spam regional strength too much. We have rotated some of that package. We did want to make sure that Burble Fish and Shelly can still be played in Nami decks and other stuff that we might see in the future with Bilgewater that uses the spell spam. It definitely is kind of an outlier, though. In my experience playing a lot of games, it's almost it's really Shelly is loudly strong, but it's usually something else that is actually beating you. It's well, if they didn't have a bunch of 0 mana Burble Fishes, this Shelly wouldn't do anything, or if they didn't have a leveled Samira or Fizz. So it's really hard because I feel Shelly, at least from my perspective, does a bit more of a augmenting the deck, but
Yeah,
isn't
Shelly is very in
necessarily
your face. You don't usually keep
itself.
track of like the
But
spells that
yeah,
are
we
being
do
generated,
see
and then
that-
suddenly
that
Shelly is
AoE
strong
health
because of
buff
that.
being really, really strong with elusives, and it's something that we're trying to keep in mind. Obviously, with the Inferna and the All Out buffs, we're making it harder to defend your units in that deck. So, for instance, against Shelly, one of the ways you can beat Shelly is actually by killing the other units that aren't Shelly, right? And then the Shelly doesn't buff herself. So that's kind of why we went that way. But when
Shelly
we do
buffs
these
them.
changes, we
So
do
you-
a lot of different iterations. Like we consider
mean-
changes to Shelly. I don't know how deep we want to get into that today, but it was certainly something we thought about changing.
Cool. Thank you for the for the insight.
Shelly's a girl.
problem.
I mean,
That's why we're
sure.
here, right?
Yeah. Next, Frank, you want to talk about Karma?
Okay, I mean, yeah,
so
sure.
this is a
Whatever,
pretty good
man.
example of an unbuff.
Does that matter?
Where, you know, back in the day when Karma
That
and like
that's
big
that doesn't
Shurima
matter, does
were
it?
struggling, we gave Karma that extra health to like help her survive. Now that she has the like worse removal in standard and set, and the coins came along to bolster up, we're taking that health back, and definitely like a small-ish nerf to Karma, but we just want it to be more of an investment to put Karma into play, especially if you ever have to put her in before 10 to really give your opponent a chance to remove her. And right now, when she comes down on 10,
Dives
it's
to
just
double
5
Mystic.
health. And 5 health is like, might as well be 1,000,000 a lot of the times. And, in the past, we used to see people play more protection spells for their Karma when she didn't have that health. And we're hoping that this change will either let the opponent actually be able to remove Karma sometimes before too much of a pop-off occurs, or make it so the Karma player has to make those deck slot concessions and go back to playing.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Cool. I think that one's
It's Ionia, man.
Do you have anything you want to add about Karma?
If they say no,
it's
it doesn't
perfect.
really matter how much damage you throw at it. No is
You
no.
want to talk about this one, about Caustic Riff?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
That's
so
good.
Caustic Riff is going up to 4 mana, but the
Nice.
flow
Oh, that's pretty huge, actually. I like this a lot.
reduction is going to go up. So
Yeah.
essentially what this means is the base cost
This
for
is a
Caustic
bigger
Riff will be
Karma nerf,
4,
to be
but when you
honest.
flow it, it'll still be 2, which is kind of the same cost as it is now. And the reason we're making this change was it was just a bit too easy for any Piltover and Zon deck to play Caustic Riffs in their deck. And we actually saw a lot of decks that weren't really trying to flow play with
Yeah.
Caustic Riff. We've seen how powerful things like TF Red Card in the past can be. Just that AoE damage at fast speed especially can be particularly backbreaking. We just want to make sure that if you do play Caustic Riff, if you want to play it, you probably are going to have to activate flow. The big thing about this is this makes it a little bit more telegraphed. Like as somebody playing on ladder, when your opponent has played 2 spells, you kind of know, oh, this is like maybe a Caustic Riff round. Versus when it's 4 mana, it can't even be played on round 2 anymore, which really just makes it generically less of a good tool. But specifically when you're flowing, it's still quite powerful with kegs. I think that this card is going to maintain a lot of its power, but just that's going
getting
to
worried,
require a
Chad.
little bit of synergy to achieve.
Have we
that
had all the
power.
Samira
And then
nerfs?
drum solo.
All the Ionia
This
nerfs?
change is just kind of a long time coming. Actually, on the design team, we've been talking about this for months. I feel like even before rotation happened, and that's the cost reduction on drum solo to go down to 1 instead of 2. One of the big reasons we want to make this change is one, we find this to just be a little bit too efficient when you're popping off, especially in the late game when it essentially just costs 1 mana. The other thing that we see is that oftentimes players having cards reduced in their hand for long periods of time, much with the telegraphing of Caustic Rift flow, it's really hard to play around. Like your opponent might have 0 mana Disintegrate that you don't know about, and then they they spend all their mana and they play the Disintegrate, and you're like, oh, I didn't really expect that. And that's something that really we want to be careful of, because that just
my
leads to
Galio
some
died
really
for
feel
0
bad
mana?
scenarios where you couldn't play around something. So yeah, we're dusting the power down, but we still think that PZ, these changes are both hitting regional tools. We still want PZ to be good at dealing AoE and being good at card drawing, but in the new standard environment, I just think that both of these could use a bit of a hit.
Yeah. I feel like too, like I'm glad you mentioned it, because when I'm playing, sometimes like if someone will drum solo and then they'll have like a reduced cost like Mystic Shot in their hand for a long time, I'm like, oh, there's no way they have removal.
Yeah, you're safe.
And then I die and I get so pissed off where I'm like, oh,
Jules is
why
one
was
of
that
us,
the
dude.
one card that you reduced the cost on. So
Nice.
I appreciate that. Okay, let's move on. All right, Steve, you want to talk about this? It's kind of in the same philosophy.
Yeah, this is actually the exact same philosophy, Julian. It's like essentially Ambitious Cultist is now.
I mean, yeah, I've gotten
going to
blown
be
out by
a
this card before.
Round 0 cost
This is
only.
good.
which essentially means when you play Ambitious Cultist, you'll get a 0-mana new spell. Sorry, if you've equipped something, you get a 0-mana new spell. And then if you play that spell, it'll cost 0, but at the end of the round, it'll go back to 2.
Yeah, good nerf.
Very
good nerf.
similar to the philosophy for the drum solo. We just really don't love having players sit around with 0-mana cards to blow each other out, especially when this new spell could be from any region, so you could just get something ridiculous to happen to you. But yeah, keeping all the power level here, just making it a bit less of a gotcha and a bit less of a I can sit around and react and blow my opponent out for the rest of the game.
This was played a lot. This is a card that is played a lot in Aatrox decks and in or Aatrox Kane.
I was like, wait, I didn't even think of it. I was like, man, I wish I could have like
Scout
abused this
and
little-
rally interaction
Anyway,
move.
you wanna
That's
talk about it?
ooh. That is a big
for
nerf.
sure.
I'm happy with
so
this.
Let me
That's
explain
huge.
the change first, because it is, I guess,
Huge.
more nuanced ones. So right now, if you use Opulent Foyer,
Oh
and
my
you
God.
gain an attack token either through attacking with a scout unit, which like refreshes your attack token, or rallying, you'll get an additional Ghastly Band. So we're changing it so when you play the Opulent Foyer, you're still always.
Oh,
Gonna
it's
get
a
that
round
Ghastly
start. So
Band,
even, yeah, so even if you're rallying the
regardless
opponent
of
turn, it
if
doesn't
not.
do anything.
But now to get the
Except if you're playing
additional
Garen.
Ghastly
Except with
Bands,
level
it's only
Garen.
gonna happen at round start if you have
Leveled
the attack
Garen.
token. Which means if you rally or attack with scout unit and you're refreshing an attack token, since it's not round start, you're no longer going to get that Ghastly Band.
Huge.
And we're making this change because, you know, pretty much since this card has come around, people have been
Oh,
really,
yeah.
like, leaning super hard into that synergy, along with all the other degenerate things that you get to do
Gwen
with scout
Garen,
and
there
rally.
you go.
And we definitely... It's not our favorite change to like have to take away a synergy like that, but we're pretty confident that those decks could still even like play this card and still succeed. And
Yeah, I
if that
think
ends
so
up
too.
not being the case, and those like rally scout decks are really struggling with that.
This card was just
synergy, I think
ridiculous,
we'll
man.
Definitely come back and look at it.
It's not OP.
But
No,
for
it's
now,
definitely not
this
OP.
just-
It,
this
it
just feels
might
like
it might be an
something
okay
we
card.
wanna do just for like long-term health of the game.
So people are asking, does it still work with Garen level 2?
It'll
So
work with Garen level 2.
it won't,
let's see.
because when you rally at your round start, it no longer. Sorry, I'm reading the text. If you have the attack token, summon the Ghastly Band.
It should, right?
Actually, okay. So how I believe it'll work is if your Garen is
On the left.
to the right of your Opulent Foyer, I think you will get the token.
But it
I
goes
would
left
have
to
double
right,
check
no?
that, though.
Cool. It depends on the order for sure.
Yeah, sorry, that was such a trick question to just.
But I
throw in
can't
there.
move my landmarks from left to
oh my
right.
God, we have rules tests. I
Garen
didn't
to
sign
the
up for
left,
this.
Garen to the right.
Bro.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I've seen people talk about. I think Aurelia and Garen work a specific way, and I think this is probably going to work in a similar way. And I do not know what that is offhand. I would have to check.
Yeah, and landmarks.
It's the
can't
same
be
with Malphite.
rearranged,
If you
so
rally-
usually
Wait,
you'll
I'm
be
gonna
able
look
to
this
get your Garen on the right, I believe.
If you have Garen Malphite, Garen level 2 will give you a
Even
Malphite
if you play
spell.
the Foyer afterwards. Yeah, that's a nice tip, Julian. You can like attack with the Garen, and then it'll be.
When
on
I'm
the
summoned
right.
around start, if you
I
have the
always-
attack token
whenever
created
I
on
do
something
these
before an answer, yeah, it
balance,
should
like,
work.
Live streams, I always learn something.
Yeah,
and
it
then
should
I
work.
Get much better on ladder.
It works with
for
it works with
views.
Garen because Malphite works with Garen too.
Oh, this next one's really interesting. In writing about in the patch notes, it's prank adjustment. Steve, can you talk about what's changing about prank?
Yeah, so I want to talk quickly
wow.
a philosophy around pranks. I think
Just
for
a
a
prank
long
fan.
time, pranks weren't working in the way that we, not necessarily not working the way they wanted to, but a lot of the power of pranks was skewed in the +2 cost.
Yeah.
And
Finally.
we often found really
been
frustrating
a year,
situations
more
when
than
you
a
get
year.
landmark or a unit +2 cost that felt
I've
really,
always said
really
this.
bad,
You
right? It
always
felt like,
default to +2
you're
cost because
taking
it's so
away
much better.
somebody's play on curve, where at least for spells you can bank mana, right? And that got us thinking, well, how can we improve pranks? Because a lot of the times when you're playing pranks, your goal is to just prank tons of spells, right? And we're like, well, what if we made the unit debuffs a bit better? So that kind of led us to thinking, well, the -2 attack debuff on prank is actually something that is rarely
it's still
selected,
+2 on
rarely
spells.
used.
Right, then
Let's
it doesn't
remove
matter.
that from the pool.
You still pick the spell.
So you'll no longer be able to hit that anymore. We're
How can we improve
adjusting
pranks?
the cost on units, landmarks, and equipment. So anything that's not a spell won't be able to get +2 cost. It'll only be able to get +1 cost. And then we buffed the vulnerable debuff to be -2, -0, and vulnerable. So instead of that -2 attack, you get both that and vulnerable. And then the last prank, of course, for units is the one that makes units can't block. And this just played
think
really
this
well in our
matters.
testing.
You
I
still
don't know
pick
if we
spells.
expect this to be something that is meta right away, but this is the kind of change that Standard actually helped us make. Now that Curious Shellfolk is rotated, that gives us some space to make new prank cards or even buff pranks without doing anything too gross, since usually Shell Folk is kind of the card that prevents us from doing something like this. So when you're playing with pranks now, you're just gonna have a lot more interesting options, especially when you hit units, because it's not always going to be feast or famine. I hit +2 cost or not.
-2
you're have
and vulnerable is pretty big.
Unit debuffs like getting
that
vulnerable, and this actually plays kind of well in aggressive decks because the -2/-1 own vulnerable or can't block pranks now are something that more aggressive Bandle City decks can use. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at here. We're calling this more of an adjustment because obviously now you can't prank landmarks up to cost. But that was really a functionality we don't want for pranks in the long term. So we're really happy to roll out this change. Whether or not it has meta impact,
they can just not play the unit,
side,
dude.
really happy
You prank the hand.
Cool.
They just won't play the unit if they see
And
Renekton.
with that, we get into buffs.
All right, let's go.
Do you want to talk
Targon
about
buffs.
some of these buffs?
The best for wait.
Yeah, for sure. Coming into standard, we know that Targon is definitely a region that maybe got like hit pretty hard.
Okay.
We're just looking for
We just played
ways
Nightfall the
to
other day.
shore
That's
that
not
up
bad.
on both an archetype and just like
The Club and Way is pretty
wider
good,
region
actually.
Level. So the first place
That's pretty
we're
big.
looking is Nightfall. Nightfall lost a lot of its kind of like reach and game-ending tools to some of the region adjustments that happen in Shadow Isles. You know,
Massive Diana, Path of Champions buff.
Stygian
Oh, nice.
Onlooker or Doom.
Yeah, that's pretty
Beast
good.
up
The
to
Club and
Dusk
Way is
to, like,
good.
Retrigger those cards. So we're looking to
Targon
put some more
overall?
specifically like game-ending potential into some of these Targon options. So to do that, we took Cygnus the Moonstalker, took 1 cost off. It used to give elusive to itself and another ally for the round. Now it just Cygnus himself has base elusive, but he still gives elusive for 1 round, and he's losing 2 power. So kind of an adjustment overall, but mostly just trying to bring him down in the curve, make him a better threat on his own. Similar thing with Cloven Way, 1 cost off the top, losing some stats in exchange, and just hopeful that this combination of elusive and overwhelm,
I don't
like
know
earlier and more
if
like
if these
reliably
become
on the
playable
curve
because
would
Nightfall
give
has just been really
Nightfall
bad,
decks a better
but
way
this
to
is
close
definitely
out
above.
games that they're really lacking right now.
Cool. All right, let's keep the buff train going. Frank, you want to talk about this one too?
Sure. So this buff
Oh,
I like
okay.
a lot because this actually came
Okay.
from an idea that I had and an idea that Steve had independently, and we
Yeah.
just like
That's
mashed
kinda
them
cool. I like
together
that.
into 1 buff.
I love
And
this,
as you can
actually.
see, we're just slapping Nightfall onto Moondreamer.
I
the
love
Nightfall
that.
Reward for our Moondreamer is going to be reducing the cost of the card that you invoke by 1.
It's-
So this is
You can play this on
less a
4.
Nightfall buff, I
with
would say. Like
the
this maybe gives
Dusk Petal
Nightfall decks
Dust.
the option to instead of like trying to close the game out, maybe they want to go a little bit longer and go more value. But we're hopeful that this will just be like
It's a
Targon
great
buff in
change, but
general,
it won't
because
matter.
Targon,
Yeah,
like,
no,
really
it's not
wants
gonna
them to
matter.
be doing this like big celestial invoke like value thing, and Moondreamer having this additional effect should give them a better chance of doing that.
This is very popular with people. People are liking this quite a bit.
Dusk Petal.
We have other various questions too. People want to know about coins, but we can talk about it at the end. Let's keep the buff train going.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then last up, as just a general Targon buff.
No.
Targonian Tellstones.
They
I think
put
has kind of
Hush
been
in
one
the
of running
Tellstones?
litters
Alright, this
for
card is
a
now
long
insane.
time.
This card
So
is nuts now.
We kind of went in there, and
This is
you know,
actually
a lot of
insane.
Tellstones try to use maybe more like
This is completely
niche or
crazy.
lower played cards to make like a cute little package. But with Targonian Tellstones, we want more decided that we wanted to lean.
What's
more
gonna
on
happen
Targon strength.
is you're gonna play this
So
card,
we replaced
and when
Wish
you're
and
playing against
Battlestar
elusive,
with
you keep the Hush. If you're playing against control,
So
you
now
play
you know
Behold the
you have
Infinite. It's actually
an
crazy.
Invoker, a Silence, and a
Wow, this
big
is
Grant
this
buff,
is
which
really
like
good
kind of
for
the three
like
bread
slower
and butter
Nightfall
things
decks too.
Targon, and this, if you know,
Yeah.
you're willing to pay that mana tax for the versatility, Targonian Tellstones.
Set Karma Targon. Oh dear God. I
Yeah,
hope they
like
nerf
this one a
coins
lot,
because
especially because I think one thing that we've seen is that
Set Karma
Hush,
Targon will be the best deck.
which originally was just a huge way for kind of the best way, the only burst way that Targon can interact with anything. But with equipments and over time, we've just seen it kind of languish a bit.
Every Targon deck, and not every, but a lot of them will.
So
yeah.
that's kind of what Tellstones are for. Hey, we got Hush in the Tellstones, so if you want flexibility, you can kind of still have that without paying too much.
I love
of a
this.
cost.
Cool.
Yeah, Invoke top deck. Yeah, this card is suddenly like
Targon
insane.
buffs.
It's actually
Let's
crazy
go
good.
to The Ascended. All right, you want to speak to this, Steve?
Sure. So
Minus
we
one
are
what
reducing
the
Azir's
hell?
quest by 1. Pretty small here, but in the new standard environment, we want to make sure that you can play.
I'm playing Turbo Azir.
More strategies.
I'm bringing it back.
Strategies or more traditional Sun Disc stuff. We want to make sure that in those decks, Azir can level up more on time. And then for Nasus, we're just giving Nasus +1/+1.
I mean, everybody loves Azir.
It feels like Nasus for a long time has not really been that easy to crank.
This is
up
why
the
Aurelia
slate
had to go, and I'm okay
now
with that.
Just less options in Standard. I think that you know, he can use the +1/+1 just to help him level up more often, and also to sort of potentially patch together Ascended decks, just making sure that that deck doesn't completely become unviable with things like Xerath moving out. So yeah, we just wanted to give some small buffs here since we feel like these cards are now just not necessarily up to snuff with the power level of other champions in Standard. So giving some small buffs here should help that.
I love it. Cool. It's great.
Put that.
-1 quest. Azir used to level at 13. Now he levels at 12.
Absolute woofer.
Next is Glory's Call.
Wow.
Yeah, so Glory's Call similarly, we tried a lot of different permutations here of like less cost or more reduction for Ascended, and like some stuff resulted in stuff that was really strong in like Eternal, which we don't really want to affect Eternal too much with our Standard patch. So we ended up with a pretty modest, just -1 cost here. Maybe this lets you play some Ascended. And honestly, I had not really played this card, and playtesting this card, I realized how strong it is, because the Emperor's deck is just quite strong. So I had a fun time with it in testing. So yeah, we really wanted to get a change here just so that you could play it in more Standard decks.
I will play it, but it's probably so bad. But that's kind of my thing, you know?
The community's favorite meme.
Oh man, we love it. Okay, let's talk about Shadow.
Oh, Shadow Isle buff. Okay.
What's going on here?
I mean, sure.
Yeah, so with rotation, Shadow Isles kind of saw a redefining of its removal tools, you know, just like
that
things.
is
like Vile Feast
pretty big.
Soul Harvest was a card that we were kind of looking to step in and fill those shoes. It's just like a Shadow Isles.
Wow, that's a big one.
And it hasn't really been hitting that beat as well.
That is a big one.
So what we're doing, small buff that we're hopeful will go a decent way, is just lowering the
small
cost
buff. I don't know. This feels huge.
From 4 to 3. And I think this just makes a lot of sense, especially in the world where like the champions you're trying to potentially target are like Fizz because you're insane, or like Samira. And
I was gonna Fizz,
All Out or something. So
Mr.
Like,
Developer.
when the potential to get like blown out and have your removal spell countered is so high, it's just like you shouldn't have to pay for that. So we're hoping with that
just use this on Fizz.
Give like more opportunity to put this cards into more decks and like feel good about picking the champion kill option.
Cool. All right, cool. Let's get into some of the variety buffs that we've been.
Okay.
Talk about this one, Steve.
All right, never mind.
I don't know if there's anything.
Got excited for a second. It's like
it's getting +4 now. So anybody looking to play some big dragon decks will have
at least that's fun.
Boost.
But,
I mean, generally you find that cards at this mana slot need to do something absolutely crazy to really be
absolutely crazy.
So we're not necessarily shooting for viability. We're just shooting for doing something pretty sweet. and yeah, that's all I got for it.
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah. This is the kind of thing where like we could look to make hydrogen cheaper and have a smaller buff, but that kind of goes against like what the giant cool dragon says. So we're really just saying like if you could pay 9
Soul Cleave, dude. If I'm playing a 9-drop, I'm not spending another turn to kill off my 9-drop.
It's actually a good point, Frank, because I think like oftentimes the easiest way to buff something is by mana cost, right? Because that's going to make it more viable. But I think generally baseline cards in lore are so strong that like most cards
Helia is interesting.
Mana cost
I could see
buff
Helia.
will, like almost immediately potentially be meta, and we try to use that not necessarily as a last resort, but it's not the first thing we try to do when we try to buff a card.
Bro, who's giving suggestions like Soul Cleave and Black Flame and 9-drop? Hello?
Yeah, this is a buff that I like a lot. So basically, it's saying now when you pull a champion with Priestess of Desert Light, it's going to grant that champion +2/+2.
Even if you summon it?
It'll do that whether you're just playing Priestess without 6 unique champions or with 6 unique champions. And basically, the goal here is Priestess is a card that asks you to do a lot of work. You know, building with 6 unique champions, getting the Priestess down, getting her to survive, and there's also like a lot of variance in that, especially when, you know, to put 6 unique champions in your deck, you're normally going to have to put in some champions that are like a 2/2 or a 3/3. Yeah.
I mean,
And
that's
with
true.
Priestess, when you pull one of those lower cost champions,
It's a really
hopefully
good
this
change.
buff will make you feel like a little bit better about
But
that.
dealing
even
4 to the
in a
Priestess
high
is
roll
so
with
weird.
Aurelion Soul or Trinity.
I think that's like
So
the thing that
just looking to more
stops this champion from, or stops this card from being played.
Off the Priestess hoop.
Cool.
So he needs +1 health. That's it. If he gets +1 health, it'll be fine.
This one, Steve.
Yeah, this is kind of more of a quality of life change than
Oh,
a
hell
really
yeah.
targeted buff, I would
Wait.
say. Essentially,
Wait.
Mirror Image
LeBlanc printer?
has the condition that you have to target a 5
You can
plus,
print anything now.
ally.
That's kinda
we're
spicy.
just
That's huge,
allowing that to
actually.
target any ally. And the reasoning is really when we see LeBlanc
More
in these
printers.
Ashe decks, you're really trying to target the rally or assessor or something like that that's been buffed up. And we think that this is just going to open deck building for LeBlanc because
Yeah,
you'll be able to
that's really
pull
good.
off some crazy combos now, which is something we haven't really seen with her. So we think that this is just an exciting
it.
change that won't have that big of an impact on
Just
the
copy
current
Ashe.
meta
Oh.
decks. Definitely.
Yeah. Shoot for the stars, right? Just
Yeah,
now you
a
can
lot-
copy
so a lot
Ashe.
of-
Oh
some
wait.
people in chat are very worried.
This
that,
is,
like,
I mean,
Ashe LeBlanc is
this
so
is not a buff
strong.
for the
Why
Ashe
are you
deck.
buffing
For the Ashe deck, it
LeBlanc
doesn't
like
matter
this?
because
So
everything
with
already
the
is 5
adjustment to
attack that you want to
Ashe and,
copy.
like, do you want to speak to that a little
Yeah,
bit?
I will. I mean, I think one of our goals on lore is just for champions gameplay
Sign
dreams
LeBlanc.
to
You
be
can al-
realizable,
guys, you
right?
can
And
already
one thing
do that.
LeBlanc really does.
You can
is
already do
create,
that,
like, multiple
chat.
mirror images, right?
What-
And the fact that it was sort of hamstrung to like a more
Chat.
reputation style deck
Guys,
really hurt
come
her
on.
ability to do some crazy combos.
Chat, come on.
So ultimately,
What are you guys
regardless of the
doing?
deck, like honestly, regardless of the deck's
The
standard,
restriction on this
we
card
think that the champions
was that it
gameplay
had to
being
have 5 or
realizable is
more
important,
power.
which is why we
Now
do
you
something
don't
like
have
this.
that
But it
anymore. You
is-
can copy
it
something with
does
less than 4 power.
technically,
Like
you know,
Teemo, exactly.
buff
Like Teemo.
essentially the existing deck because you
Like
could do
Revna.
something like
There you go.
mirror image a Trifarian Assessor that has 4 attack now that you
give me
couldn't
the
do
ideas.
before. Overall, though, with the nerfs to Reckoning and Ashe, we really think that this is, you know, it's not a good trade deal for that deck. Let's put it that
No,
way.
it's not.
Do you think that it would open like opportunity for maybe LeBlanc to find a spot in a different deck too? With,
That's the hope, but it's good that you said opportunity too, because we don't necessarily think that this will make a new meta deck, but like somebody might experiment with it, right?
yeah.
Like I don't even really know, like what could you do with this now? Like you can target Revna.
Somebody might
you know,
just
that's
do
pretty
that.
sick. I don't know exactly, you know, if that's a deck, but I'm excited to try it out.
yeah.
Who could that be? Revna, yeah, I'm down
This
for
one,
it.
Frank?
Whoa, 10
Yeah,
mana?
definitely. So this is actually a small redesign.
Oh,
we did.
what
So
the
for
hell?
People not familiar with the Gunners, it used to just be an expensive unit that when you summoned it,
Wow.
if you went through the hoop of, I believe, 4 multi-region allies this game, you got the reward of the 3 impact. So while a very powerful effect, it just didn't really fit with the
With
multi-region,
Owlcats,
you know,
that's
the
actually
wide
pretty good.
span
That's actually
low to
pretty
the
good, I
ground
think.
thing that the deck
This is a
really
good card
excels
now.
at. So we've redesigned
Yeah, with Grandfather
it, keep the
Fae,
spell shield, keep
Owlcats,
the impact
that's
stats,
good.
but now the cost just scales down 1 for each multi-region ally you summoned. Basically, think it's like the multi-region.
And it's Spell Shield, Impact
Wiggly
3. That's
Burble
just good.
Fish.
That's actually
And,
really good.
This is a change we've like had kind of in the.
You
back
also have to
pocket
realize
for a
that Battle
while.
City doesn't really get to play
We
5/5s.
Didn't do it when Tristana and like Atrocity were kind of popping off, but now post.
Yeah, we did that for the Lockout Challenge, exactly.
Tristana's kind of like back to struggling again a little.
That's a cool
bit.
redesign. I love these redesigns.
Could come in and hopefully give that deck a new angle to shine.
A lot of people, I like this new community nickname. They've named it the Bandle Fish, which I think, I think that's
That's a
gonna
good
stick.
name.
That's good.
I wish I was smart enough to have put that on the slide.
It's okay. Someone asked when the patch goes live. The patch will be live on Wednesday around.
Yeah,
10
Jack's
a.m.
Bandle Gunner.
Pacific
Oh, wait,
Standard
that's actually sick.
But let's
Yeah,
see
Jack's
if
Bandle
I can
Gunners?
stuff.
Because you can put a weapon on it.
Yeah, so Advanced Intel has been a card that has been historically kind of, unfortunately, a throwaway card. What we're doing to it is we're letting it draw a card, but making it cost 1 more.
That's pretty good too,
Essentially,
actually.
we think
That's
that
not
Flash
bad.
Bombs are kind of... Now, with Flash Bomb Peddler, we actually see like people play
This is-
Flash Bomb
th- th-
Control a
this
bit
is
more,
actually really good
but
now.
still, there's some of the cards in the Flash Bomb package are almost like... Advanced Intel,
Wow.
especially, kind of an
This is good
unusable
because we
card that I
have
don't
the 2
think
peddlers.
anybody has seriously made
Do nothing. It's not a do nothing, it's a
without
cycle.
any sort of like
And it's- and
maybe
their spell
card
synergy.
generation.
It's
they've
actually good.
created it. So we just want to give Flash Bombs 1 more
Guys,
way
you
of
don't
just sort of
play this. Like,
get those
you're
Flash
not
Bombs
like,
rolling,
oh, I need to
as
spend a
well
mana.
as, we
I'm going to play
nerfing
2 mana
drum
draw card. You
solo,
don't
so
do that. You
giving
wait for your peddlers.
gives you a little bit of drawback potentially in those Flash Bomb trap decks.
Someone in chat asked, and I
It's
also asked
it's
this
Pokey
too.
Stick,
It
but
is
better.
you draw
It's
yourself,
Pokey Stick
right?
at burst and it deals 1 more damage.
Yep, just
fishing
you.
for their- Okay, cool. And next, the Deathless Knight.
Okay.
I mean, this is just a super cool card. Has a lot of like exciting synergy moments.
You can get a
We're just
turn
bringing the
4
cost down by
6/6
one
now.
to hopefully give players who are
All right, I know what
interested
I'm putting into
trying
Black
to
Flame.
Pop off with.
Oh
Deathless Knight a
my
little more
God.
opportunity to do so. Not too much else to this.
Yeah, Visionary likes this one too.
Cool.
All right, that's
And
pretty
then
great.
our last buff of the day, Steve.
Yeah, the Retired Reckoner potentially picking his gloves back up. Just getting additional attack here. Pretty simple change, though. We actually looked at a bunch of changes.
It's a cool card.
Actually,
it's
the
probably
release
so
that
bad.
I worked on way back, the champion expansion of Opulent and
retires.
Diego with some of the like Noxus self-targeting Reckoners.
At 4 mana, this
we
card
just
would've been
landed
sick.
on thinking that Retired Reckoner specifically felt like just a little bit too understated to see play, but we think it's a fun card to build around. So giving that one
Yeah.
attack
At
to
5
see if
mana,
we can get him out of retirement, and if not, maybe it's just more of a viable option that players can play in the future.
Cool. I've seen a few comments.
Wars
of people
Varus?
Like, oh,
Yeah,
these
sure.
are cards that I don't really see a lot. So
Well, that's kind of the cards we target with the sort of like variety stat buffs usually, because they're cards that just are underplayed.
Yeah, because pretty much all the lower cards have a lot of like love and care.
I mean, I'm
put
gonna
into
play
them.
this with
They
Riven.
have some like cool animations,
but it's not gonna be good.
art or voice lines, and like if they're just sitting there and no one's using them, those are definitely cards we look to see if we can just get like people excited to just like try. Again.
I actually love that because there are so many voice lines I've never even heard.
I think it's interesting too.
And it's
because,
a
like,
waste,
when
because now
something's
we
out
get good
wild,
cards
like,
that
I
don't
know
have
when,
voice lines.
Inferna was released. People
Right.
were like sleeping on Inferna. So I'm always, I'll have my own ideas of like, oh, this is really
That is
gonna
LSR
affect the meta,
teaser?
and then
It came out like 2
sometimes
years
ago,
stuff
though,
that
dude.
I didn't personally expect will just kind of.
Might have been
Take it
sleeping
over.
on it for a day.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
If even a day.
napping on it.
Yeah.
So there
pre-release, it was
there
done.
were 2 questions. I'm going to go back to the main page that I saw in chat that I want to ask you guys. Also, chat, that is it for our changes. We are going to be putting out an infographic in all languages later today that just show buffs
No
and
coin
nerfs,
nerf.
and then patch notes will come out tomorrow. But please enter into chat questions. Yeah, I'm going to ask the coin question. I'm going to ask another one too about Caustic Riff. So, all right.
Yeah.
All right, so a lot of people, myself included, have gone against Karma set and just like Karma coming down, turn 10,
Yeah.
having a doubling coin, infinite draw. Like, what is like your guys' stance on, I guess, coin and Karma doubling coin? Is that kind of like part of her fantasy? Is that why you guys adjusted HP rather than coin interaction? If you can just like, Steve, you want to?
I want to
I
know
can
this too.
start. I think that in terms of the coin deck itself, the Karma set, we honestly consider it a fairly healthy deck. Like, it usually has a pretty good win rate. It's got a decent play rate. Obviously, there is a lot of players that enjoy the sort of combo play style. I think that usually what's important to us is like the severity of combo.
Healthy?
We really think about like what turn it can happen, right?
Yeah, just like my
Karma set
McDonald's
is a
diet
deck
is
that
healthy,
really
right?
Doesn't start popping off until round 10. And you
Because
can really
I want
attack
to
them
die
before
when
that
I
round.
turn 40.
And I think that generally Karma is a kind of a card that has historically been this sort of like frustration point for players where it's like, oh, once they get to round 10, they have Karma active. The one thing that I will say though is that a leveled up Karma has never really before been as potent as it is now. Because I think specifically just Karma plus place your bets kind of is just GG, like on its own.
Yeah. Kinda
Assuming
GG,
like
yeah.
you have sets in your deck as well,
Yeah.
to like come out and play the set, which I think is something that we might want to look at in the future because it's kind of like a 2-card combo. Usually combos we think about like in lore, especially putting a bunch of cards together, right? When that's happening on round 10, we're usually allow players to be pretty flexible with it because they have 9 or 10 rounds in the game to end the game before that point. Obviously, the deck is pretty good defensively, right? We have changed things like Caustic Riff to hopefully make it a little bit less good defensively. But yeah, in general, like Karma is the kind of card that is honestly
just gonna be
doing a lot of strong
Targon
things,
Karma
but
now.
it really only does that on round 10, which is almost past the point where the average lore game usually ends, which is why we generally think it's pretty healthy. In terms of the Karma coin interaction, it is something that is incredibly strong. Like just creating a ton of mana and taking a ton of actions is really just kind of frustrating to play against because it's like, oh, my opponent just gets to do 10 things and I get to do none.
I don't
and I
know,
think
man.
that if we did change something, we would look at specifically making something about that less explosive. Because I think personally, like I've played against tons of Karmas in the past where, you know, in the past, players have tried to like go hard with Karma, which almost doesn't even really work because you shuffle more go hards into your deck, and then you can sort of like make, you can kill the Karma usually. But yeah, I think specifically Karma set is like, no, just Karma plus place your bets. So I think, yeah, what I'd say is that I don't think that place your bets plus Karma set is necessarily, or sorry, place your bets plus Karma 2 is necessarily the most healthy pattern, but because it happens at such a late stage in the game, we didn't feel the need to make any changes. Plus the fact that the win rate of the deck wasn't something that was really
I don't know, man.
cracking the radar.
It's so it's like
something that
it's
needed
frustrating to play
changes.
against.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Frank. I'm sure that I missed stuff.
Yeah, I would just add in that. So when we were working on coins in development, I was on the game analysis team at the time. So I was really, the big focus of that team was like balance and play against frustration. And we kind of knew,
Play against
like,
frustration,
working with
yeah.
designers on the set, that like a mana cheating mechanic is definitely like you're putting some spice in the pot with that one. And we were, you know, we tried various things like in dev, like we had the coin at focus at one point, and it just like wasn't feeling great. And we were like, combo players don't get catered to super often in Legends of Runeterra, like more of like the big Karma combos. And so we really wanted this mechanic to potentially serve those players. So we're definitely happy that it is doing that and that the win rate isn't like insane.
Oh man.
But there is also that balance.
There's
of,
no
like,
Varus nerfs either.
Obviously the combo players.
Samira
have a ton of
Varus
fun.
was
It
untouched.
Really, even if it is like balanced, could be.
It's
still
gonna be a
super
month of
frustrating to
Varus
play against.
Samira.
We are hoping some of these nerfs that we did will alleviate some of that frustration.
I think
but if
that's
that
potentially even
continues
worse.
To not be the case, it is definitely something that we would look at again. So we are like happy and excited with the ways that players are using coins, but we're gonna keep a strict eye on making sure that it's not like going over the top.
Cool. Yeah, and one of the other things that actually what Frank mentioned that I wanted to like add is that sometimes for things like coin, it's actually not
small though.
That simple because there are so many cards that make coins, right? That if we did something like make the coin copies only make 1 mana, like right now the only decks that coins are played in, I believe, are like Jack Seraphine, that copies the coin with Seraphine, and Karma Set usually, that copies the coin with Karma.
Yeah.
You know, we could potentially just delete like 20 cards on accident if we went too far, which is why we just prefer to do the changes that we did and just see how the meta is going to play out.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's one of the things too. Like it's really interesting being a
I don't know, man. Like
playing the game live.
Sure,
like, watching.
we have to see how the meta plays out. But Samira Varus is already the best deck in the game. That's not gonna change. Karma Said was never the best deck in the game. It was like top 5 most played decks, but it was just frustrating.
And whether adjustments need to be made.
It was just frustrating to play against.
Like I think one of the things for us to consider too is like maybe our like the deck that like our shape that we really love isn't the strongest right now, but I feel like everything kind of like gets its day in the sun, so to speak.
Yeah, Samira Varus,
to make a daybreak
probably.
But
it's been meta for 1.5 week.
This is kind of like a deep cut, and I only saw like one person mention this, but so the Caustic Riff change happened, but I think one of like the scariest things that happens is when BB comes online with Caustic Riff. Is that like a type of play style that is like, do you want to kind of reward that combo of like, okay, you let BB stick, you got all these spells out, and like this is your reward, you get like a full board clear? Or is that something that's such an edge case that it doesn't really like come up too often?
So basically if you're, from my perspective, if you're like combining 2 regions like that and going for a very specific card combo and you like put in all the work, like I think rewarding that in that way makes sense to me, especially because with BB you do have that keg sitting there and the opponent does have the opportunity to be like, okay, if I can break this keg or like time my spells correctly, the Riff isn't going to do as much. I do think if specifically that interaction can continue to overperform, to me that sounds like more of potentially, as much as it pains me to say this, more of a BB issue than a Caustic Riff issue.
Yeah, I think that like BB Caustic Riff, you're starting off with like, you know, that's a combination of 2 regions, right? You're basically locking yourself into those regions.
That's fair.
And
it's
I think
2 regions.
Specifically, at least
Karma
our changes
coins is
will
1
make
region.
it so that it is harder to get that combo
BB is
off
Mischievous
than ever
Mirai.
before, especially because BB is usually pretty vulnerable to removal, like single combat or something like a tag out or even something like a Hex Splitterator. Like there are a lot of ways that you can remove BB. Obviously, you can burst speed, make a bunch of barrels and then Caustic Riff, which is like a really smart play. But then if you do that, then you can.
Yeah, I don't think this is a problem.
Right? So I do think that generally it's a pretty healthy play pattern of like I am trying to stack barrels. I think where BB actually gets kind of more unhealthy is when we're going with like burst speed damage.
Yeah.
When you're going for
With,
like a
the
bit
warning
like
shot.
Seraphine with Sputtering Song Spinner, and then you go for like a warning shot for like 10 damage. I actually
agree
think
with
that is where I think we run into more issues because you can't
That is
deal
the
with
real
the barrel
problem,
or the BB.
100%.
You basically don't have any options.
I think the Caustic Riff is totally fine. It's frustrating with the deck. Some decks can't answer it, but the warning shot is a problem. That is Ezreal levels of degeneracy.
Mo kind of just asked general, like, what your guys' take on like aggro in the state that it's in? Like, do you think that there's like strong aggro options, or are there like things that you're keeping an eye on? Just like the archetype.
I mean, generally, I think
Yeah,
we
our
always
egg roll
see
decks
strong aggro.
good right now.
Though we did nerf some of the Leona
Mo
stuff
loves
in
his
the
egg
match.
rolled eggs.
I do think it really sometimes is a categorization thing. Like, what do you consider aggro? I think
it varies from
if I'm
person to
think,
person.
I don't have like the meta deck list off the top of my head, but I do think that Samira Leona is like the very clear aggro player and was like almost statistically one of the best decks, at least a few over the course of the last month. So I think that generally aggro is in a relatively healthy state. I do think that some of the changes to Noxus kind of fundamentally changed how aggro works because you just don't have Rearguard and Decimate anymore, which really makes it harder for decks like Annie Jin, like really pure burn style decks that I think players will all consider aggro, not necessarily as powerful as they used to be. So that's something we can definitely look at moving forward.
Cool.
Yeah, I would definitely say that to me right now, it seems like aggro is skewing maybe like slightly more mid-range, which makes a little more sense with the rotation cuts, or like maybe doing more like combo-y Samira things. Samira definitely is like propping up a lot of like aggressive strategies. And I don't think
that's
we would
fine.
always want it to be like, oh, you have to go to Noxus or you have to go to Samira to play aggro.
Samira being aggro is
I
fine.
think like aggro as a whole is in like a fine state. I would definitely want us like like with like the Nightfall.
Varus
buff,
is
where it's,
not
like,
okay though.
Hopefully we can get like different flavors of aggro to like have more representation in the metagame.
I think that's a really good distinction to make because I think some people probably think of like pirate aggro.
Yo, Feroldo,
like,
thank you for the
that's
prime
aggro.
sub.
Like this is the type of aggro that I'm used to seeing. Okay, cool.
Varus is combo.
So I'm actually going to answer. There's a question about starter deck reworks, and I'll answer that, and that'll be our last question for today. If you guys have more questions, like literally post on Reddit, hit us up on Twitter. We will answer. So we have information coming out in the patch notes tomorrow. But we are going to.
Aggro's not. No, I think aggro's pretty weak. But I think if Samira is an aggro champion, that's fine.
This next patch,
With the way
we're
C
gonna be
is.
offering.
But C is enabling
7
combo
free
decks
starter
and mid-range decks.
in the store that anyone can redeem.
Everything.
We've been really trying to get them into our tutorial section, but we've run into a lot of interesting scenarios with the code surrounding that. So we are going to get something out, and yeah, just as like we recognize that, we totally agree with y'all. Like we want a really good onboarding experience. So in 4.5, like I'm going to mention this in the patch notes too. Keep your eyes out. Go redeem these free decks.
There we go. That's
and
one
get your
thing I
friends
wasn't
play.
allowed to
Tell them
say.
that in the next patch, there's going to be a really nice.
But they said it now, so I'm gonna guess that that's fine for me to say.
Yeah, there'll only be
Because I was working on the
available
beginner's
until
guide.
We can get the whole tutorial section all buttoned up and have those new decks into that tutorial section. It is, yeah. Yeah. So, all right, y'all.
Free decks.
We are at time here. Thank you so much. I know there's so many amazing questions, and we were only able to answer some of them. Like I said, reach out to us anytime. Y'all are absolutely awesome. I'm glad that you're here supporting us. Ruben, do you want to any closing remarks?
I can't say
No,
what the
just
decks are.
Thanks everybody for being
But
here.
you'll see tomorrow.
We really love doing these streams when
Yeah,
we can.
it's fun.
So,
I love
yeah,
these
thanks for
streams. I
having
love these
All right,
streams.
Chris, any closing remarks?
Yep, just also want to say thanks.
Next
Happy
week.
to
Beginner's Guide
talk
next
to y'all.
week.
It's always nice to get to give some context on why we do what we do and hear all the awesome questions y'all have.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next
Peace.
time. Patch 4.5 is going to have
Bye,
some new
Vriz,
cards
Jules,
that's
and
gonna be
Ruben.
really focused on balancing around Eternal as we move into the Eternal competitive meta. So, all right. See you next time.
All right, I'm going to do a quick recap with the fantastic LOR report write-up, or rather visuals. We're gonna start with the Ashe deck. Ashe goes from 4 to 5. That is a pretty big nerf, but the deck has stopped playing for Ashe for the most part. Ashe was more of like, hey, here's a good unit that will sometimes win the game, but they barely play any freezes, except like the cheap stuff like Brittle Steel. I think they run like 1 or 2 flash freezes, and that's it. So this nerf is pretty good. It will definitely slow down Ashe a lot. It will take at least 1 or 2 more turns to level her, which is big. It also makes attacking with her more important, and that's not always easy. And the Reckoning, quick Marshall, fix it. From 6 to 7 mana, this is a nerf that I was absolutely not expecting. I really wanted them to hit the Trifarian Assessor for this deck, make it go to 3/3, because the only deck where that matters is Ashe decks. Everything else plays that card that doesn't buff their deck. Maybe Bard decks or something weird. I feel like that would have been a really elegant nerf. This is, I mean, Reckoning, I guess it's the same thing because it's also only played in Ashe deck. So yeah, I guess that's fine. It's just that I feel like I lost by far the most games against good and like actual good players and people that understand the Ashe deck. I feel like I lost most games against them because of the Trifarian Assessor and not Reckoning. This card, you can play around it, but yeah, you do get checkmated sometimes where they have multiple 5 attack units and you just can't develop anything. So sure, this will hit the Ashe deck hard enough that I will expect it to see a lot less play, and the win rate will definitely drop because of it too. Then we have the nerfs that are specific to the Fizz Samira deck, pretty much. All Out is a good nerf. This was absolutely necessary. This is exactly the nerf that was needed for the Fizz Samira deck. However, I think that this nerf is strange because it's the only thing that Samira is getting, is like from our Samira package that is getting nerfed. And this is not really played in Leona Samira or in Samira Varus. Leona got nerfed hard enough that this doesn't really matter. And we will probably see that deck differently and just a lot less powerful. But yeah, I'm worried about the Varus Samira deck. Okay, Wiggly Burble Fish going to 8 mana is also a great change. This will make it come down like a turn or 2 turns later. Very good. One thing about Burble is also that sometimes you played 1 Burble for 1 mana, you got the spell, you played the next one for 0 mana. And those kind of things are a lot harder to achieve. So great nerf. I'm happy to see the spell slinging stuff. Like either Shelly or Burble getting nerfed is basically the same thing. And I think Burble is stronger. Burble is definitely the stronger card of the two. Inferna going from 1/5 to 1/4. Yeah, thank God for this as well. Because Inferna should have never been 5 attack in the first place. So many challengers in this game have 4 attack. We just got Set released, which is a 4 attack challenger. I feel like that would have been a very natural counter to Inferna. But see what is he stuck around on 5 health that you just could never kill her. Oh, HP. Yeah, no. A 5 attack elusive for 4 mana. Yeah, let's not do that. I mean health. From 5 to 4 health. Yeah, now she is killable by Screeching Dragon, by Set, and especially with All Out getting nerfed too, it will be even harder to keep her alive. So these nerfs for the Fizz Samira deck are huge. It will definitely take the deck down, but I expect it to still be strong at what it does. 100%, especially with Pirouette not getting nerfed. Leona to 5 and Sun Guardian to 2/2. Yeah, this is a huge nerf. Again, also great because Leona was just played in so many different decks with so many, like, maybe like 10 cards from another region or another package, and you just played the standard Daybreak stuff like Ravoon, Leona, Sun Guardian, the 1-drop. So this is another pretty fantastic change. It makes it harder to just be like, hey, I want to play this package, let me just put in Leona because she's just self-sufficient. Great change. Very happy with this. Absolutely necessary. We see the Karma nerf from 4/4 to 4/3. Yeah, I don't know about this. I'm a little bit iffy about this nerf because I would have really liked to see the coins nerfed. And I'm saying this as somebody who played the deck to Masters and hated it. Absolutely despised the experience. Karma as a 4/3 just doesn't matter. Like if you play against a deck that you know can remove her, you play her on turn 9 into turn 10. And then you place your bets, and the game is over. It just doesn't matter. It's Ionia. They will protect Karma some way. So yeah, I don't think this nerf matters at all. But yeah, apparently they're saying that the win rate of the deck isn't very high. It's seeing less and less play. So maybe we just gotta suck it up. Maybe the deck is just absolutely miserable to play against. Winning against it is miserable. Losing against it is even more miserable. I don't know. I feel like it's not enough. Caustic Riff is a great nerf. It's much more telegraphed. You can see it coming. And decks that are just playing Caustic Riff because it's such a good card will have a harder time because they will also have a hard time activating Flow. Very good drum solo. I'm surprised it took this long. This is much more in line with the kind of card draw we have. And you no longer have to worry about like a 0-mana Mystic Shot or back in the day a 0-mana Seraphine and a 1-mana Ezreal just bursting you down when you think you're safe. Fantastic change. Very happy to see it. And these are the final nerfs. We have Opulent Foyer Foyer to no longer summon any ghastly bands when you rally or when you scout. Only on round start. So round start means the game checks when the round starts if you have the attack token. So it will still work with Garen. Because again, it checks on... What the hell? It checks on round start if you have the attack token, and with Garen you do, so it will rally. It will rally and summon the ghastly band. But otherwise, it doesn't work. If you start the round on the opponent's turn and you rally, you don't get the ghastly band. Fantastic. This is really, really big, by the way. This is huge. This is probably why they didn't have to nerf Cataclysm or something. I would have liked to see the Ranger Knight Defector nerfed. That would have been a good one. I find that card very miserable to play against because often it just deals 10 damage, at least, on the turn it's played. Ambitious Cultist, I think this is a good nerf. Less blowouts, less random 0-mana disintegrates when you're not expecting it. It's a good change, but yeah, this card is played in Varus Samira, and this is the only nerf to that deck, which worries me. Good change though, but not enough. Okay, we see the pranks rework. Don't think this matters right now. Might matter in the future when they decide to print more prank support, cards that make pranks. And then we have the buffs. So Sickness goes from a 6-mana 5/3 to a 5-mana 3/3 elusive. Nightfall give an ally elusive this round. So the text stays more or less the same. However, Sickness is always elusive and it costs 1 less mana. That's a pretty big buff. I think Sickness is meant to be paired with Diana because Diana is the card that increases her attack when you activate Nightfall. So that makes it a very good finisher. It's kind of weird because Diana has Challenger and usually you want to use it for that. So I feel like with Winning Light also in the game, you're never going to play both Sickness and Winning Light in the same deck. So this might replace the Winning Light. It's going to depend on what's played right now. If there are a lot of elusive blockers, then this becomes a lot worse, obviously. So then we have the Cloven Way, which goes from 5-mana 5/4 to 4-mana 4/3. This is a pretty big buff. I expect this card to find play somewhere. I don't know where, but this is pretty big. This is a big change. Maybe Targon Overwhelm in some way, like Targon Freljord Overwhelm. Jhin, it's pretty big for Jhin, yeah. The Clubbing Way, yeah, it has like a big club, but it's out of the picture. You can't quite see it. I like this buff a lot, but we'll have to see where it will actually end up being playable because I don't see it right now. But this is really good for Overwhelm decks because you stun the biggest blocker and then all your other stuff can freely attack. Huge. Very good. Moondreamer, this is my favorite change of the entire patch, even though it's so small. 5-mana 3/6, still the same, still invokes, but Nightfall reduced that card's cost by 1. Now, the Nightfall thing itself doesn't really matter. But this now synergizes with stuff like Diana and with the Dusk Petal Dust. So you can play this for 4 mana sometimes. You can play a lot slower Nightfall decks now because of this, and I'm all about that. I love that. And, you know, then the invoked card is suddenly, like, insane because it costs 1 less, and, yeah, you know, you always get something that's great because invoking just gives you a really good card. 0-mana Equinox? Sure. Don't mind. 8-mana Great Beyond? Even better. Very, very good change. I love this. I'm going to be playing with this card a lot. Then we have the Ascended buff. So Aurelia got rotated so that Azir can level faster. Sure, I'll take it. Nasus gets +1/+1. I like this change, but I don't know how much it's going to matter. Because if you're playing a Slay deck, Nasus will already go pretty fast, and then that +1/+1 matters. So this might matter for specifically the Ascended decks, because Ascended decks don't really slay very much. Glory's Call. So the problem with Glory's Call is that if you're playing this in an Ascended deck, you don't really need it because you can already get the Ascended deck itself. And you don't need to like manifest a random card from that deck because if this costs 1 mana, you're still overpaying 1 for a card that is from a time where these cards were above average and we're now in a time where these cards are no longer that good. And they're very, like most of them are very situational. The best one is the 5-mana 6/6 that summons 2 Sand Soldiers every turn. And that's about it, really. Don't know about this. It's, I don't expect any of these to really matter. And then this is also a big one. This is another one that I love. Such a freaking cool change. So Targonian Stealth Stones, instead of Wish and Paddlestar, now has Behold the Infinite and Hush. What this means is that you're going to play this in every single Targon deck that isn't aggro, basically, that isn't an elusive deck. Even an elusive deck is fine because sometimes, you know, giving your elusive +3/+3 is pretty good. But here's what happens. You're playing against a elusive deck as Targon control or Targon midrange, whatever. You keep the Targonian Tellstones just so you can Hush their most scary unit. And Hush is really good at dealing with buffed up cards. Pantheon, Kaisa, like the deck we played a while ago, Kill decks, anything that buffs Hush is great. But if you're playing as a control deck, then you have another win con through the Behold the Infinite. And you're probably playing some Nightfall stuff, like the Moondreamer in his deck. I can imagine going into turn 5, you're playing against a controlling opponent, and neither of you really want to spend your cards. What you do is you play the Targonian Tailstone, you play Behold the Infinite, you get a card, and then you play the Moondreamer. And you get another Invoke card, and you won the game, because you have way more value than them. And you get a 3/6 on the board. It's so good. And Zappy, thank you for the 11 months. Appreciate it. Super big. I actually love these Invoke buffs. This is not how I expected them to buff Invoke, but I love the way they did it, yeah. Okay, Soul Harvest from 4 mana to kill a champion to 3 mana to kill a champion. Pretty big change. I really like this. It felt so bad to spend 4 mana to kill, like, a Samira when she could just all out. Great change. Soul Harvest will be played in, like, every single SI deck that cares about killing stuff. Very good. Catergan is still unplayable. It's pretty fun to try this out and have every dragon be a win con. It will also make leveling Aurelion Soul really easy, but you just can't play a 9 mana card that does nothing on the turn it's played. It just, I don't think that happens. Don't expect this to see play anywhere. Priestess of the Desert Light, I like this because sometimes you're playing a deck and your units, like to fill up those 6 slots, you need to play some stuff that's pretty small. And you feel pretty bad if you're just summoning like a Talia that's a 3/5 or a 4/6 or whatever. With this buff, it now becomes a 6/8, and suddenly that's like a way better payoff. The problem is she still takes 4 damage and kills herself, which makes this card unplayable. This is not going to see play anywhere. Mirror Image can now be used anywhere instead of just using it on 5+ power units. So we can print Mirror Mages, we can print, I don't know, anything that didn't have 5 power before. I have no idea, but we'll figure this out. This is going to be a change that is great for content. I'm excited about it. Can print Ashe? She could already print Ashe. Chat, I've said... Chat was going crazy. Oh my god, you could print Scion now. You could already do that. Oh, you could print Talia. Yeah, Talia's a big one. The Maduli too, if there's no Chime on Maduli yet. Yeah, sure. You could... the requirement that is removed is you no longer need 5 or more power. You could always print either follower or champion. That was always possible. Okay, and Bandle Gunners, this is another really big change in my opinion. This goes from a 8 mana 7/7 with this weird effect to a 10 mana 5/5 spell shield, 3 impacts that cost 1 less for each multi-region ally you've summoned this game. This is going to be fantastic in Jax decks. In Jax decks, this is going to be 0 mana so fast, and then you can just put like an overrun weapon on it, and suddenly you're doing like at least 3 impact damage plus the +2 more from their fish overrun. This is fantastic. I love this change. You can mirror image Bandle Gunners now. Oh my god, they're right next to each other too. Yeah, this was intended. And Advanced Intel, this is another great change. It goes from 1 to 2 mana, draws 1. You want to hold this card in your hand until you have both peddlers on the field. And then when you're slinging all your spells because your opponent's about to remove your stuff, you play the Advanced Intel, you draw a card, you maybe draw another spell, and then you play it. You pop off with both peddlers. That's what this card is for. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to randomly play 2 mana burst, draw a card, and plan 2 Flashbomb Tramps. You don't do it for that. You're only doing it to trigger your spell synergies, and it's great at that. And then we have the Retired Reckoner from 2/6 to 3/6. It doesn't matter. Still for 5 mana, unplayable. Deathless Knight goes to 5 mana now, and this is fantastic with the Oblivious Islander. I'm actually going to double check that Oblivious didn't get rotated, but I don't think it did. No, Oblivious didn't get rotated, right? Oblivious is still in the game. It did get rotated. He did. I was really excited about this card, and now it's just despair. Now it's just complete despair. Yeah, and Fading Memories is gone too. Oh wow. I don't even know how you give it, like with what? With the 1 mana +2/+2? Give Ephemeral? Yeah, Soul Cleave, sure, but Soul Cleave is, you're still playing 5 mana, and then you get to 6/6s. That's not that good. It might be okay with Callista, sure. Maybe with Callista, maybe this is good. I'll play this with Callista, like Black Flame Callista or something. I'll try it out. Yeah, you get 2 6/6s, and that's it. I mean, yeah, it's nice that they reduced the cost. It probably couldn't be 5 mana with Oblivious Islander in the game. A 4 mana 6/6 is pretty good. But I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, okay, fine. Oblivious Islander would probably break this card. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the patch. I think the changes are very good, but I'm a little cautious about Varus Samira and Karma Targon. Those are the decks I'm a little bit worried about. I don't expect any of these buffs to break the game in any way. I don't think there's like a clear new tier 1 deck laying somewhere here, but the Targon Tailstones are a pretty big deal. Targon definitely needed the love, and I'm very happy that they got some. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you happy with the patch? Do you hate it? Are you worried about Samira and Karma like me? Let me know. I'm at least excited to play with some of the new buff cards.